So on today's call, I'm Jennifer Paulson, the Director of Development and Training for THN, and I will be facilitating this webinar. Also on the call to answer questions at the end are Christine Gendron, Executive Director for TNOIS, and Lindsay Marsh, Data Coordinator for THN. So to give a background, the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness created a framework to end youth homelessness. The goal is to end homelessness among children and youth by 2020. We know we need better data for this population, which will allow us to implement more targeted service strategies and coordinate systems and services to support them. Now for a brief history on Youth Count Texas. House Bill 679 was led by Representative Sylvester Turner, and it's for a study and a count of homeless youth. So the data will be used to develop a strategic plan establishing steps to be taken and timelines for reducing youth homelessness in the state. For HB 679, youth is defined as younger than 19 years of age. The required data elements are in addition to HUD's data requirements. So what about the data? What happens to it? COCs will retain the data that you collect in your own communities. The statewide Youth Count Texas data will be owned by TDHCA. So that brings us to today. So TNOIS worked on the legislation for House Bill 679 with Representative Turner's office. TDHCA contracted with TNOIS to develop and implement the Youth Count Survey, and then TNOIS contracted with THN to provide training and technical assistance. So there are priority communities, and these are the Homeless Housing and Services Program, or HHSP communities, and you're being encouraged to participate if you're in one of these areas. Everyone is being encouraged, but especially these 8 cities. So Austin just conducted their youth count in October. Houston, Fort Worth, City of Dallas, City of Arlington, San Antonio, El Paso, and Corpus Christi. So beginning in January of 2015, HUD required COCs to report the number of youth households that are defined as persons under age 25, including the race, ethnicity, and gender data for parenting youth and unaccompanied youth counted. Youth Count Texas gives us an opportunity to not only conduct a count, but a more in-depth survey and study than what may have been done in the past. So to do this, TNOIS has created 2 survey tools. The PIT survey can be used for both adults and youth and includes both the HUD required data elements and TDHCA data elements. There's a more in-depth survey specifically targeting youth, and this can be done in addition to the PIT survey or as a standalone survey done separately. Or you can incorporate the required data elements into your survey. So there, in the handout, that's the required data elements that are highlighted, and you can take this and put it into your survey. So to help with the count, you want to develop key partnerships, and these include youth service providers, TNOIS member agencies, nonprofits, government agencies like CASA, Youth Services, LGBTQ organizations, your local McKinney-Vento education liaisons, health service providers, the faith community, and in the toolkit that TNOIS has developed, and there is a link in the handouts, there is a developing partnership sheet in section 2 of the toolkit. It lists the services to at-risk youth or STAR providers in each area, and CASA stands for Court-Appointed Special Advocates, in case no one knows that. Be sure to engage the LGBTQ agencies in your area. They're very interested in this study. They know that LGBTQ youth experiencing homelessness are particularly vulnerable, experiencing higher rates of physical and sexual assault and higher incidents of mental health problems and unsafe sexual behaviors than the heterosexual homeless youth. So these organizations want an accurate count for consideration of needs and resources, and they will be happy to partner with you on this. So things to consider for planning a youth count. Creating a working group with community partners, and many of these are similar to preparing for a regular PIT count, but there's some extra things to take into consideration when working with youth. And so identify methods to avoid count duplication, outreach plans such as holding magnet events, and in the next webinar I'll go more in depth in magnet events. Determine times and locations for youth count, so the number of teams needed to canvass the areas, number of youth that you need to help with the count, drivers, materials, incentives if you're going to use those. Develop a data plan collection with your local liaison if you're working with them. Use the toolkit that TeenNoise has created for training, and recruit quality volunteers who are sensitive to the diversity of unaccompanied youth. And then develop a process. I'm not sure if I said this, so I apologize if I'm repeating, but to keep youth safe, it's very important, including the youth that you may have helping you. How to be sure sheltered youth are included in the count. Be sure to check with adult shelters as well as youth shelters and transitional housing programs. Work with shelter staff on how to administer the survey, and consider the time frame for the survey. Are you going to do it one night, 1 week, or during the last 10 days of January as required by HUD? And then consider all places youth may be found. I mean, the streets, encampments, but abandoned buildings, laundromats, 24-hour restaurants, convenience stores, bus stations, recreation areas, and public transportation, the terminals and the stations. So rural communities have different challenges. They may have fewer services. I mean, many of them obviously do because they're smaller. Larger areas, they're more remote. There may be more of a migrant population. And strategies include working with the local education liaison, working with your coalition, identifying other youth networks, including local youth groups, and working with local churches or businesses to provide a safe environment for a magnet event. If you can, have youth that are either currently homeless or have been homeless in the past, helping with identifying areas where youth may be found, and ask them how to engage these youth. Keep in mind that youth that are no longer homeless may be more reliable since they are more stable. Recruit good volunteers, utilize incentives if possible for participation in the PIT, recruit the faith-based community to assist with magnet events, and engage the local education liaison. Provide great training, and participation of the school is up to the school district. Some are not comfortable with advertising events that are not sponsored by the district due to liability issues, so keep that in mind, but do engage with your local liaison nonetheless so that they are in the loop and aware. So there are incentives that TeenNoise is offering. It's a $2,000 grant to help offset costs associated with planning Youth Count Texas. It's available to the 8 priority cities that are the HHSP cities. The incentive can be used for organization, planning, conducting, and outreach for the count. The COCs will need to sign, or the cities actually, will need to sign an MOU with TeenNoise and submit an expenditure report, and they have all of that information. And if you are interested, contact April Farino with TeenNoise, and her email is afarino@teennoise.org. That's also in the links list of the handouts. So what are the next steps? Do you want to do the tango or the cha-cha? So contact Christine Gendron and April Farino. Again, their email addresses are on the links list in the handouts. And they would like to know your decision on whether you plan to participate or not participate in Youth Count Texas by Friday, December 18th. Include who from the COC, Homeless Youth Services community, and your local education agency is at the table, and who is the lead person or number of people responsible for the youth strategy for your pit count. After this webinar, you'll receive a survey when you close out, and that will gauge your or ask for your level of participation so that we can gauge who is we need to work with more. And then the resources, so you can download the toolkit at the TNOYS website. And again, that's on the links list. And we will have another webinar, and obviously I talk really quickly, so we'll have plenty of time for questions and answers. So the next webinar will go into more of the outreach, magnet events, and raising awareness. Again, it will be 10 a.m. December 9th, and there's a list in the handouts. So that brings us to the questions. I'm going to unmute our two people, and if you want to type in any questions into the chat box, I can open it up. So let's see. Okay, so
Demetrius, Emma.
I've unmuted Lindsay and Christine.
Yes.
Christine, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, awesome.
Okay, so far, I don't have any questions in the chat box. So, Christine, is there anything that you saw in the webinar that you'd like to address, or anything that has come up you think people need to know?
I don't think so. I missed the first couple of minutes because I was having problems logging on. And so I don't know if there's a way to find out who's on the call, and then maybe see if people would be willing to just share whether they're planning to do a count.
And we will have that at the end. There's going to be a survey that they'll go through.
Okay, okay, awesome.
Wow, so if we don't have any questions, then let's see.
I have a question, and maybe people can type the answer back. I'm wondering if anyone has had a chance to look at the surveys and the toolkit materials, and if so, if you can share your thoughts on whether those things will be helpful to you. We really want to make sure that the resources and materials that we have, are of interest to people. And so if there's something else that people need, we want to know that.
Okay, we'll see. Okay, so there are some questions. They weren't in the chat box, but I found them. So, are youth currently in custody of CPS counted in the youth count?
What's the question? Sorry?
Are youth currently in custody of CPS counted?
Okay. That is a really good question. So TDHCA is working with the department to figure out which youth that the department is involved with will be counted, if any. There's something in the legislation suggesting, I believe the language was that youth awaiting foster care placement will be counted. And TDHCA is working with the department to figure out what that really means and what population would be included. But for the purposes of the survey, youth who are, for example, placed in a shelter by Child Protective Services wouldn't be counted as homeless because it's a CPS placement, and so in that sense the provider is, well really the department is the guardian for that child. So the youth in CPS custody who will be counted, if any, that will just be handled by the agencies through like an agreement to exchange data. At least that's my understanding at this time.
Okay. And then there were some questions about the incentives. Let's see real quick. And okay, so I just muted you, Christine, because I was getting feedback, but I'll unmute you in just a second. There are questions about the incentives, and yes, they are only for the priority cities, but still contact April if you are interested in the incentives, the $2,000 grant.
And I'll just add to that, if your city is not one of the priority cities, but you would be interested in an incentive, let us know. Because if for some reason not all of the priority cities need it, we might have funds left. We also have another, kind of an unrelated grant for youth engagement. So if you're not one of the priority cities, we might be able to provide you a little bit of funding from that grant. That would be more like a couple $100 rather than a couple thousand, but specifically for engaging youth as leaders in the planning of your count. So the more information we have about what everybody needs, the better.
Okay. Next question, let's see. Okay, so Estella Garza, how connected are you, I believe this is to you, Christine, how connected are you to THN and all the efforts with the COCs statewide? Tell us more of your collaboration.
Okay, so Jennifer, feel free to jump in here. But so Texas Homeless Network is leading these webinars, and we are working together on this initiative. So we're connected. We have been talking with COCs. It seems realistic that in many communities the COC will be the best fit to do this count, and in many communities it might be part of the point-in-time count that the COCs are already doing. So for that reason, we are working with COCs. We're more connected with some than with others. We are trying to connect with all of them on this initiative, and that's one of the things that THN is helping us with through these webinars. Jennifer, is there anything that you want to add?
Nope, that sounds good.
Okay.
Okay, so someone wanted to see the priority cities again. Next question. Has anyone had any success with engaging juvenile detention facilities? Do those youth count as homeless?
That's a really good question. I'm not sure what has been done with those facilities in the past, and I don't know if any communities have plans to engage with those agencies locally yet, but at the statewide level, TDHCA is also working with the Texas Juvenile Justice Department, similarly to what they're doing with DFPS, to figure out which youth in juvenile placements should be counted. I think there's a general agreement that not all youth who are placed in state juvenile justice facilities or even local ones should be counted, but that some of the youth in those facilities are homeless. And so those agencies are trying to figure out what data they have on youth in their facilities and how to make sure that those youth are counted. And that might be a really good thing for communities to look at the local level, to talk with local probation departments and the juvenile justice agency to figure out how to count those youth.
Great. And then Carla in Dallas said Dallas counts the runaway youth minors in foster care.
Oh, that's a good point. So if a young person has run away from foster care, then they should definitely be counted as homeless. That's a very good point. I think what we had kind of decided at the statewide level was that if a young person is in a foster care placement, so for example, living with a foster family that the department placed them with, that's not homeless. We're still trying to clear all that up with the department. Frankly, I think the department is concerned that if a good number of youth in their care are counted as homeless, that there could be a lot of negative headlines related to that. And so they seem to be taking a really conservative position on who that they're involved with counts as homeless. But someone who ran away from a foster care placement would definitely be homeless.
Okay, and then again from Dallas, Dallas's youth committee will be looking at the surveys today to see if they can incorporate T-Noise survey into their adults survey, so that's good.
Awesome, and that's something that T-Noise or THN can help you with if you need it.
Yes.
And actually, we're going to be uploading a few more things that might help you with integrating these questions into your survey. We have a document that provides the sources for where our survey questions came from and a justification for why we think those questions are important for Youth Count Texas. And then there's also a survey key that you'll be able to give out to volunteers to provide clarification on what questions mean if they're not sure what it's asking or how it should be answered. And so those might be useful to you as you're looking at integrating questions into your own surveys. And while this slide is up here with the priority communities, I think Jennifer already covered this, but I just want to mention that this is a statewide count. We want as many communities in the state to participate as possible. So please don't decide not to participate because your community isn't on this list. These are the cities that TDHCA selected as the top priorities. And so we're working really hard to make sure that counts happen in at least these cities. But ideally, they're going to happen across the state.
Okay, great. Let's see, the next, okay, and Stacy McCoy asked about the COCs being responsible for organizing the youth count, and that is correct, but T-Noise and THN can provide training and technical assistance on that. Okay, and then Carol in El Paso asked, what are the allowable costs for the incentive dollars?
That's a good question. We are working on something that will have that information in writing. TDHCA is still looking into it. What we are trying to do is, so there are some restrictions. Obviously, the money can't be used for alcohol, for example, but that probably won't be needed. But we know that for a magnet event, you might want to purchase food, for example, and even that can get tricky for TDHCA. So what we're looking at doing is setting up like a list of categories that you can spend it on, and that might be a broad category like your magnet event, and then you don't have to detail whether the money was used on pizza or drinks or games. It would just be for the magnet event, and that would be acceptable to TDHCA. And so we're still working with their contract and billing department to figure out how we can leave you guys as much flexibility as possible while still following the agency regulations.
Okay, and then are youth counts conducted every year? So I can answer.
Go ahead.
I'll answer part of that. That yes, for as far as because HUD has requested that we start doing a better job at counting youth, and of course we've wanted to. Then yes, that if you're conducting a PIC count in your area on an annual basis, then youth should be included in that. Youth Count Texas is actually the first initiative for getting a more in-depth count and study and more of a survey effort.
Yeah, and what I'll add to that is that Youth Count Texas is the first time that the state of Texas is asking for this information. So this will go to the legislature instead of just to HUD and present an opportunity to advocate at the state level for services and supports for youth who are homeless. And then also what we found, so Austin just did a youth count in October, and LifeWorks partnered with ECHO, the COC here, to do the count, and I believe they counted 59 youth who were homeless. And my understanding is that during the point-in-time count last year, they counted 8 youth who were homeless. So what we're seeing is that when there's an emphasis on the youth count, rather than just a general point-in-time count, that more youth are identified and counted. And that's one reason that we think this initiative is important.
Okay, and then the next question, will there be future webinars to assist us with how to throw a kickback party for youth? And I'm not familiar with kickback party for youth, I know, but we can certainly discuss that and maybe include it in the magnet events. Okay, any other questions?
Jennifer, I just want to add one thing, if that's okay. Someone mentioned training and technical assistance earlier, and Jennifer said that TNOYS and THN will both be providing that. And so one of the things that we will be offering training on for those who are interested is we've put together a training curriculum for COUNT volunteers. So if you will be organizing a full-blown standalone youth count, we will, if you're interested, we can travel to your community and train your volunteers prior to the count. The training includes content on building rapport with youth, staying safe during a count, the actual survey questions, all that kinds of stuff, protecting confidentiality. Alternatively, if you are going to count youth as part of your point-in-time count, you probably already have your own training for that. If you're interested, though, we can join you for that, and we can do a portion of the training on specifically the youth stuff. So, for example, how do you build rapport with youth throughout the interview, that kind of thing. But it's up to you. We do have a bunch of Youth Count Texas t-shirts that TDHCA ordered, and we would like to be able to get those to you. And so when we potentially go out and offer training as an opportunity to do that, if you don't want the training, then we can mail the t-shirts to you.
Okay, it looks like that's all of the questions that we have. And then for future webinars, there is the list in the handout. So again, the handouts, you should see it in the panel to the right of your screen. It says handouts. There are 3 of 5. allowable. But anyway, there are 3 handouts in there. The webinar series is one of those, and we will go more in depth in the next one about how to hold a successful youth count, including planning magnet events, using social media, and then outreach and engagement, getting youth involved, and then getting youth to your magnet event. And if that is it for now, then we will, you can sign up, you can register for next week's webinar, and we'll have 5 in the series. They're listed. In the meantime, please, we will be, yes, Alexis, we will be, thank you for reminding me, we will be sending out the PowerPoint presentation and a link to the recording of this if you'd like to listen to it again or watch it. And then that will be it. So, Christine, you have anything else to add?
I don't think so. Thank you.
Okay, and the survey afterwards will let us know how you plan on participating, if you will kindly fill that out, and otherwise I will end the webinar, and thank you for attending, and we'll see some of you back in the chat screen next week. Thank you.